So, hello. I'm very honored to moderate this last group discussion, and we have heard plenty of different interesting stories about industry perspective, how to start business, how to do business in screen media industries. And now we are turning to another point of view. We bring in the university perspective, and we are going to focus on industry-university collaboration. So, actually, according to the OECD statistics, the university-industry cooperation is still considered as low, although it has actually improved significantly during the last decade. So why we should actually care about this collaboration? The statistics have also demonstrated that better collaboration leads to better innovation performance of the country. And in our panel we have a very good representation of different types of innovators. We have Belgium, actually, who, according to the last innovation scoreboard, is among the innovation leaders. Then we have Norway, who is actually among the strong innovation country. And then we have Estonia, represented by three of us, and four. And this Estonia belongs to the moderate innovators. So we have an opportunity to discuss why this kind of differences actually are between the different countries. But before we dive into this interesting topic, I'm kindly asking you all to introduce yourselves. And let's do it a little bit different or untraditional way. That you start with highlighting what's your connection to the topic, particularly this industry-university collaboration. And secondly, I also kindly ask you to actually tell an interesting or funny or unusual or unexpected story of your experience of industry-university collaboration. The story may be yours or somebody else's. It's completely up to you. So, let's start with innovation leader, Belgium, Heritiana.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for introducing me as an innovation leader. So I'm Ranaivoson. I'm a professor at the Universiteit Brussel, dealing with media economics and policy. So, as you can imagine, I'm going to be talking more from the university side. I think I have quite some experience now in terms of this collaboration with the industry in very different forms. What remains for me the most challenging, but maybe one of the most interesting example of collaboration with the industry, screen industry or creative industries in general, was that I was coordinator for a project called Where Sustain for 3 years. And basically in that innovation project we were like a bit like small incubators. We were selecting, supporting, funding teams of artists and technologists to develop sustainable wearables. And well, that was a huge journey that we had to do with not so much of a budget. And I had this initially I was like, that's really not funny, so should I tell this story? But anyway, this very interesting story, I think. Of course, when you have to select and fund such teams, you also have to evaluate them. It's public money in the end, so you want to be sure that you give the money to the right teams. And so we have this team. It's an online evaluation. I have around me virtually jury members that are not part of the project. When we have this team arriving online, they are one of the best team of that batch. I'm like, okay, it's going to be an interesting discussion. And then they arrive, they make a presentation, not very good. Okay, maybe they're not comfortable. They respond to the questions very clumsily. I'm a bit disappointed by what they just done. And then, after they're done, I don't remember if it's an hour or in the end of the day, I get a very angry email saying, in your jury, you had somebody who is our competitor. He stole one of our ideas previously, and we don't want to get evaluated by him, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so of course I didn't know anything about this story. I had to go back and forth to see. And we found a solution that is not so good and not so interesting, but that's probably the most challenging story I have about collaborating with the industry.
It's a very good example of confrontation also from different people. Perfect. So, Tiit, let's start with the moderate innovator.
Tiit Jürimäe is my name, Estonian by nationality. I work for the European Commission, so it's located in Brussels, so I can also take some glory of being the innovation leader. But at the same
you
time,
also choose the right seat to next to.
Yeah, so we are going on this way. And we are also responsible for this interesting statistics you were referring to. Estonia used to be a strong one, but according to the last two innovation scoreboards is on the moderate one. But I'm not going into the discussions, what kind of indicators are behind that and, how that's evaluated. But at least it's fair and equal to everybody. I joined the Commission Research and Innovation Department back already 16 years ago in 2007, and one of my first tasks was to deal with university-industry collaboration called knowledge transfer. And then we, 1 year later, published the first recommendation and guidelines on knowledge transfer. And one thing I was really amazed about, that starting the job, knowing little about university-industry collaboration, I very quickly wanted to get grasp on the topic. So I took the first report available, and it was telling me that SMEs collaborating with the university, it could be counterproductive for the SMEs.
That was a start.
I was astonished. I'm here recruited in order to improve that, and now the report tells me that actually SMEs shouldn't collaborate with universities. Something's totally wrong there. But the argument the report made, and I still believe that it's quite a right one, was that collaborating with the university, if there are not right conditions at the university, is very resource consuming for the small enterprise to do. And while the competitors are, like Dagmar saying, making sales, you are struggling and spending resources with university collaboration, which doesn't lead to much of the outcome. So since then, we have been, with our recommendation, but also the recent ones, we have tried to improve this environment and to lower the barrier of cooperation between university and SMEs.
Thank you. Excellent example. Katrin.
Yes, hello. My name is Katrin Pihor. I'm coming from the Ministry of Education and Research. Our department is responsible for creating the environment for the universities to cooperate with the business sector. But my story is actually from my previous time, where I used to work with the policy think tanks over 15 years, and we actually worked very closely with the academia. And the experience that I actually got out of this cooperation was that you never expect the insights and knowledge that actually this research cooperation can bring you. We had, for example, a quite interesting project. Usually social scientists, they do models, they do surveys, so there are quite common methods that you apply in the policy research. But then we had a project where we had to measure the economic effect of the structural funds investments into Estonian transport system. And then we thought that why not to involve some planning researchers, people who deal with maps and trying to put the social data on the maps. And that actually kind of opened up a very different dimension of this kind of potential effects and made the actual impact quite nicely visible. And that was quite different angle from the policy research side. So this example is very nicely showing that if you bring in people with knowledge and different kind of backgrounds, you can enrich your own field of study. And I think it also goes for the university business cooperation. That is one of the important things inside this.
Yeah, like they say that innovation always emerges on the border zone on different fields and angles. Super, thank you. Alan.
Yeah, so I come from the private sector, so it's obviously a new world. I mean, I haven't been a student since 2001. And I've been working for myself. Last time I worked for someone was Senator Ted Kennedy in 2002, so that's 20-some years working by myself. Yeah, I have white rabbits, so I don't have to really explain anything about that, I hope. My story is that I've been working with Tallinn University on a white paper on the participation economy, which I slightly introduced. And working with Indrek, among others. Alex Norta is also involved here. My story is simply that today was the first time that I met Indrek, and he is much taller than I thought. I was sure that he was shorter than me, and he's a head taller than me. So I don't know if it's a camera angle, or if he's slouching, or what's going on there. But yeah. So, but obviously the process of working together is different. It is. I wouldn't necessarily say speed is a factor, but it's also depth. So there's a lot of depth. Conclusions are drawn very quickly in the business world, and here there is much more depth. So the process of creating that white paper together was, and even I would say even the outcome. We recognize the fact that this is a good paper for research, but in terms of a commercial paper, it has to be rewritten. So those are the differences there. Height.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you this scientific discovery today also about the lens. And we have Sten. So you are in the midnight time or something, or very early morning in Taipei, I think.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me? All good?
Yes, good, all good. Yeah, please.
Hello everyone, my name is Saluveer, so I guess I consider myself as a media and technology entrepreneur and ecosystem designer. My connection with both universities, academia and business goes back way long, so as many of you know, I'm a bit of a lifetime learner. Have had a few master's degrees and now I'm finalizing my PhD exactly on the top data inquiry into value systems in European media industry. But I've also run accelerators where I've helped different universities spin-offs to go to market, including Botemel, Dagmar and her team. Have designed a few strategies for governments, including Startup Estonia strategy that also aims to support university and industry business making. And last but not least, I've been also working quite a bit with the EU, with different European commissioners, helping set some visions in place when it comes both to media and innovation ecosystem in Europe. When I was kind of thinking about a funny story, I really didn't recall a funny story. But what I'd like to kind of put out that although there's a lot of talk about how university industry collaboration is very difficult, there can be also success stories, and there are also many success stories from Estonia, but however not yet from media. We can think about skeleton technologies, which is doing some extraordinary work at superconductors, but a little bit closer to media. A few years ago, there was a spin-off from Tartu University called FITSME, which was founded by two close of mine. And basically what FITSME does is that it develops virtual clothing robots for some of the biggest online retailers. And that actually started as a kind of a toy project in one of the Tartu University departments. And thanks really to this great team where some of the brightest academics and some of the best startup founders in Estonia came together, FITSME actually grew very fast, and it was a few years back exited to Rakuten, which I think is the #3 online retailer in the world. So yes, amazing collaborations can happen if the conditions are right, and I'd love to share you a little bit more in the panel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sten. As you all see from this introduction, actually the topic we're talking about is extremely wide. And Ulrike gave us only 1 hour, so we had to narrow it down somehow. And I thought about focusing mainly on research and development type of cooperation. And there is a very good reason to do it for that as well, because there is truly room of improvement. Besides these very good examples that have been happening, but still there is also some weaknesses and lack of cooperation that also has been acknowledged. And there is a very good citation that illustrates this situation, and it comes from Ursula von der Leyen, who has said that we Europeans are excellent in making science with money, but we are not so good at making money out of science. So we are trying to focus discussing on how to actually improve the situation in this our long panel. So we have decided to structure our discussion into 3 main topics. We firstly try to cover a little bit the current situation, then talk about different expectations from different perspectives, as we have all representatives for public, private, and academia sector. And thirdly, also try to give some good recipe that could actually work in order to improve the collaboration between industry and university. But to start, let's try to first define what's actually the collaboration between the university and industry mean, what it's about, how we can frame or define it. Heritiana, could you please try to frame it somehow? Start framing it, and then the others can add.
Thanks for asking. Yeah, it's. I think my main answer would be a non-answer in the sense that it's very broad, the types of collaboration that there can be. But I think it's important to also have that in back of our mind, that the collaboration can really take different forms. It goes from taking, let's say, the media professionals, the media industries only as objects of research. Of course, I'm not going to develop that. I think it's a bit obvious. To really take them as really the subjects, like you want to really involve them. So you, of course, can observe them, interview them, but you can make the step after and work with them or for them in some research, whether you are more developing on the technological side, but also if you are in social science and humanities, because maybe it's already the second step of discussion, but I think because there are something that academics can bring also to the companies, to the different also types of companies in our sector.
So, Sten, how would you like to add to this framing of the collaboration? You have so many different experiences and angles to that.
Sure, I think it's a very paradoxical time where I think university-industry collaboration, especially in Europe, can go to the next level. I think it's a very well-known truth, and I fully agree with Ursula von der Leyen that in many cases, especially on this tech transfer area, we're really lagging behind. We have so many good examples from the United States. Think about the MIT Media Lab. We have actually amazing cases from United Kingdom as well. Think about the Explorer Media Innovation Lab, which I think is in Yorkshire, which is a 7 million R&D facility, basically working on virtual production, VR, and all kinds of next generation media technologies. Unfortunately, UK is not part of Europe. We want them back. Seems like from next year onwards, they are part of Horizon Europe again. So yes, and also Norway, Media City Bergen, which is an extraordinary cluster in Bergen, where they're manufacturing some of the best camera technology in the world, used by BBC as well. So what I wanted to kind of say there is that in many cases, I think in Europe, we tend to think about the media and R&D and industry is somehow like two really different domains. And it might be that we're kind of dealing with a prejudice that if I guess on both sides, that both the academia feels and the industry also feels that this collaboration would somehow kind of undermine their integrity. Right now, of course, when we see in the larger ecosystem that the problems in the ecosystem, for example, especially the big competition with the big tech companies and etc., are getting so huge that it's definitely clear that the media companies themselves are unable to survive that shift, whether it's about AI, whether it's about data, whether it's about knowing your customer, etc. So I think now we really have a very, very small window, actually in terms of policy, but also activities both on the side of the industry and the university to run fast and do that catch up, because the momentum really is right now.
Tiit, would you like to add something from this, like a system point of view to this different modes of collaboration?
Yeah, indeed. I think when we look at Europe, we always talk about famous 3% GDP spend on R&D, which means actually the public is spending 1% and 2% spent by industry, which by nature means that 2/3 of researchers are actually working in private sector and not in the public sector. So I would say that everybody who is sitting in this audience today might equally end up on the private side. So one is definitely the career perspective. And if I would be a student, I would be desperately looking for something already during my studies, at least for summer period, to cover my rental cost or whatever. So, I would be, working with industry already during the studies. And then if staying in the research career, I think that's where it goes a little bit difficult, because the academia business model so far has been much about publications and lesser of working with industry. Whereas I think over the last couple of decades, the public sector has tried to reduce the funding directly allocated to universities, so that the universities need to find some extra revenue working with industry, so stimulating on that. So I think there are different levels of university-industry collaboration, but the one we have been increasingly talking about, and Katrin told me from her recent visit to Delft University now as well, that what is the mission of a university? And we have been talking about value creation. So not only that you educate people, not only you do research, but what kind of value in the society that creates. And if you start thinking about value creation in the university or as individual researcher, you immediately need to start to think, where is the business which actually can bring that service or product to the society. So this is one hook which I think ties up together in one ecosystem.
Katrin?
Yeah, I would actually add...
I even didn't have to ask anything, I think.
Yeah, quite different angles. I think one thing or one risk that we can actually face is that we will take the collaboration as aim as such. But I think everyone who's dealing with university business cooperation should always keep in mind that behind this is some specific interest. There should be a common interest and common space for cooperation. It's not that we just collaborate for the sake of collaboration. It's nice to have smart people in the room, but still it should have some aims in it. And there we indeed end up what Tiit was mentioning, that we have to ask ourselves, why are universities or why are companies actually wanting to cooperate? And from the university side, what we see from the ministry is indeed also the kind of policy shift that our universities used to be kind of temples of knowledge, somewhere very up in the hill and far away, but providing the poor knowledge on a very high quality. But it doesn't really, it doesn't really bring value if nobody is using this. So we see also the kind of shifts in the universities, kind of strategies that they try more and more emphasize the impact that this knowledge can actually create. And then vice versa, it's actually the expected input that the universities could give actually shifts also the research agendas. So you see this kind of circle of movements in this policy environment. So I think we indeed live in the area that is quite changing the culture and ways that how we see this role of the research in the society.
Alan, do you see that universities are more and more welcome and warm feelings towards the companies? How do you see that something changes have actually happened?
Yeah, I had the experience here in Tallinn, and it was
warm welcome, yes.
Very warm welcome. But it was also, it was a collaboration that was, where we had very common interest, where there was no, there was a grant from the EU, but there was no financial entanglement in terms of, IP or anything like that, So it was, the commercialization of it is not a complicated matter whatsoever. However, that being said, I do follow a lot of people on LinkedIn that share stories, tell stories. There's an American VC here in Europe called Michael Jackson, who was very upset. I read one of his posts, in an article he posted, that the universities had maybe unrealistic expectations towards ownership in startup companies, which would make them uncompetitive at later financing stages, especially compared to US companies. If you're going to go raise money in Silicon Valley, you need to have founders with more than 50% of the ownership of the company by the time they exit a Series A. I think in Europe we see it differently, not only from a university perspective, but even from the private sector. And I think that's a very unfortunate thing, because founders need to have, or should have, in my opinion, a very strong role in the development, leadership of that company, at least until the Series A stage. And I think if there are ways for universities to get a return on their investment that doesn't, stop a startup from reaching that financing level, if there's other revenue sources that are possible, I think that should be considered, because you don't want to stop a baby in its tracks. It needs to grow.
Yes, we definitely are going to talk about the expectations from different sides in a little while. But before that, I actually wanted to ask Sten that as we are still in this ScreenMe-Net Conference, then when we are talking about this industry-university collaboration, is it somehow different or something peculiar about this screen media industry when collaborating with a university? So you have different experiences. What they tell us?
Yeah, of course. We at the media industry, unfortunately, we want to always paint a better picture than the situation really is. And we want to it's true. When I started kind of working for Cannes, then everybody said, hey, your life is great. I said, it's exactly the same, but problems 100 times. So the media industry is very good, especially in Europe, in kind of covering up its tracks and trying to be a little bit more shiny than it actually is. And I think, I think the first of the solution really comes on kind of admitting where we are. Things are not, too great, but they're not too bad either. And I think we really need to kind of start identifying the problems, and then, solutions through R&D or university collaborations come on. But the other points, what I wanted to say is that, and this actually comes back at the educators. And I have been also teaching at the Baltic Film and Media School. And what I really found very alarming, with a few exceptions, is that the students, even on their master's courses, are not really ready to the level of how they, even not what the industry needs, but how the industry operates. For example, what I mean by this is that quite often media students have to be taught what is streaming, what are the business models, how this industry operates, how those deals are being made, what are the, really the actual problems in the market, besides creating great films or TV programs or journalism. What exactly is the kind of the everyday life of a professional working in this field, and et cetera, et cetera. So in many cases, and unfortunately, the situation is the fact that the university education is really not on par of what the market really needs and what the market desperately needs. For example, one of the cases is that myself and a couple of other universities, the SVPS from Poland and the institute, the Dutch Institute of Media Studies, on this we have been working actually on an online program to teach journalism students before they graduate what are the requirements of a data-driven workplace for journalists right now. So definitely there is a very, very urgent need for a dialogue of saying, hey, what is exactly this type of a skill match? On another end, of course, I can also say is that the industry itself is also not very good at communicating its requirements and skills. A lot of the needs in the industry are almost like vocational or guild-based training, where you kind of land on the job, you learn on the job, and there is a lot of kind of informal networks and connections and things which are really hard to put into practice in education. So especially for I would say young talents or even for researchers coming into industry, there is a very, very steep learning curve. I would say at least 3 to 6 months of understanding what is the vocabulary, what is the terminology, what exactly are the problems if we are working on the domain. So there is definitely kind of a need of leveling up on both sides to kind of to achieve the same state of the art.
Yes, it is very good that you actually already pointed out some difficulties in this collaboration, and I actually wanted to ask that we have slightly, you all have touched upon it, but when I asking that what's actually the main challenge or how you evaluate the current situation in this industry university collaboration, what would be the 1-2 main things you should highlight? Tiit.
Yep. I think what Sten was already pointing out is speaking the same language, so understanding each other. So very difficult to talk to each other if you are not at the same pace. Interestingly, we have in this Ministry of Economics, we have a head of innovation department, Sigrid Rajala, who just before summer defended her PhD on university-industry collaboration, and taking that to an interesting angle using the semantics or semantic approach. So definitely this is something that I think several public sector, there are grants available of cross-sectorial movements, so people from industry can take a grant and teach at the university the language and the modus operandi of the business, and vice versa, that the researchers can move to industry for a period to see how that operates. So talking the same language, I think one and clear thing. And the other, what Alain was mentioning, the different look at the value of the knowledge or the value of intellectual property. And so here we argue that the both sides should look at the societal value which is coming out of it. If I'm valuing my knowledge too highly, which is counterproductive for business to make it, then it's not going to happen. And vice versa, if the private sector wants not to value at all what has been the effort of creating that knowledge in the academia, it's not going to happen either. But both sides having the common objective of getting that into the market would also, that needs a change of the mindset.
Yeah, totally agree. Heritiana, what would you add in terms of the main challenges in the cooperation, how you see it?
I think, I don't know if I'm going to add a lot, but I will definitely develop on what was just said. I'd say that first, indeed, it's a question of having a bit the same language, of trying to really find a common ground when you talk about the things. It's also a problem you see when you have just looking within academia, people who are from different backgrounds. Even when they work together, they also have to adapt to some language. For the value, I would even go a bit broader than that and saying that each side, or sometimes more than two sides, each side needs to understand that that they have different objectives. And the idea is not that the objectives become exactly the same, but that of course that we find a way to align them. And don't think one has better objectives than the other, but if we think very pragmatically, for example, or it's a bit caricature, but yeah, researchers, usually they have to publish first. They have to have a research paper, they have to have good research papers, and so on. For the businesses, usually, at least at the end of the day, they have to have enough incomes to cover the costs. They can also want to become very rich. I don't know if media is the best sector for that. But at least they have to do that. And sometimes they just need to be aware that it leads them to have different short-term and sometimes long-term objectives. In terms indeed of social value, that's one thing, but even at the very stupid indicator of, yes, I need to have more publication in these very good journals than the previous year and so on.
So, Alan, if I ask you what's the most valuable, when the cooperation actually becomes valuable for you or from the industry perspective, what has to be there?
There has to be knowledge transfer that is mutual, I think, is a key factor. And I have to say I'm very excited to hear about the social qualifications or demands that will be coming, because I think that companies with the size of companies we're talking about, they've become bigger than most nations, especially the biggest ones. And I think that research going forward needs to have a clear mandate to demand some kind of understanding of the consequences of what we are developing. Researching AI is obviously a clear example of that. So I think that to set those demands and to ensure that the publicly funded universities are demanding social or looking at the consequences for society, I think that's a key factor. I think it's very exciting. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that.
Having these shared values is definitely important, but when it comes to actually paying for a cooperation, when it's the private sector has to actually finance also this cooperation, then it usually becomes in a way that it's not so much about this big social value, but it actually has to make money for me, for industry. So I still have to ask you that what kind of value it has to be that you would be ready to pay for it as a company?
Well, yeah, there has to be some kind of profit motive that's clear for any investment that you make as a company. But what is a profit? This is also a very interesting question. Yeah. So profit is not only monetary. Profit is employee growth. And their interest in staying, seeing that the company is developing. Really investing into research. So I think it's simple. When you come to a shareholder situation, then it's only about profit. Unfortunately, that is the nature of the beast, and that is what determines whether the CEO sits or goes. And there, I think there's a big social discussion to have. And I think the more we can broaden the understanding of profit, I think that would be a positive outcome for everyone, and also for which directions conglomerates are taking, because they need to be really challenged on how they operate.
Yeah, totally agree. Katrin, how do you see that from this public sector perspective, that how to change that universities are mainly assessed by the number of obligations, and then earning this third pillar is kind of the next or the third thing to do? So how we change this attitude?
I would actually come back to Alan's comments that it's quite interesting. I mentioned that universities' culture is somehow changing, but what we also see is that the company's culture of cooperation is changing. So there is less and less project-based cooperation between business and universities, and there are more this kind of long-term framework type of cooperation, where we see that, and especially in this case of this huge corporations, where they really want to be very close to the new knowledge that is created, and therefore they actually invest a lot into being close to the knowledge. So we have to keep it in mind, and probably this is also a path that Estonia should also consider, that we should not only concentrate on this kind of short-term project-based cooperation, but the rather framework how universities and businesses cooperate. But indeed, I think academia is, as I said, universities are turning their faces to the community and seeking for the impact. And also the academic career models are already being shifted towards more softer requirements. But still, I think this we need to keep in mind, or we shouldn't really hope that the cultures of corporations and universities will kind of merge and becoming similar. We simply have to admit that the academic culture is something different from the corporate culture. We have to find the common ground for cooperation, because as I said, the essence of the universities is to create knowledge, and create knowledge that is valuable for teaching, for companies, so on. So this wouldn't change. And in the creation of knowledge, for example, that is quite interesting. If you look from the point of view of a company, your speed or your time frame is very short. You try to kind of, if you have an idea on the product, you try to launch it as quickly as possible, go to the market, validate it, and then develop further. From the side of the university, it's quite different. You have to be convinced that this is something that you just kind of realized, that this finding is proved, is validated. And it actually takes a lot of time in research of this validation. And then you see these two different cultures conflicting in a way. So, but I think there is, as I said, we have to kind of find the common ground and mutual understanding between these two cultures. That would actually...
This slow academia and much more hurrying industry is like a myth that is actually following us in all these kind of discussions. Have you actually any good example of the opposite way in your experience, that actually the academia is much more quicker and the businesses are something that actually can't come along with it? Sten?
Yes, actually, I just want to make another kind of a comment, both of what Tiit and Katrin said. I think the point of close to knowledge, and I think this is like kind of my call to action, both for academics and the media business as well. So a few years back, I was sitting in the office of one of the European Vice Commissioners, and we had a hearing of one of the very big platforms. Doesn't matter which the platform was. But let's say, you can kind of figure out who are at the top of the value chain. And kind of, and that particular representative of the platform was so proud, telling us there that, it's so great to hire all of the best data scientists in Europe. And Europe is amazing because that gives them the best data scientists. And of course, it was very tough to hear that. So my kind of CTA at this point basically is that, I guess most of the people in the hall and in Europe generally care about, a pluralistic media environment, availability of competitive services, and etc. So I think the really first point is that from a university point of view, both for the professors and the managers, is that, think seriously, where do you want your talent to be employed, and, where their knowledge goes. Again, from the media corporation's perspective is like, hire the local talent or hire the European talent, because otherwise how can you complain that your best talent is building those products from Silicon Valley? So this is just, I want to, make very straight about that. The second point, just very quickly on here is, A very, very simple shift also can occur really by understanding where the knowledge is being accumulated. Basically, we can think about, not as, I would say, groundbreaking or first knowledge science, but also applied science. And one of the really great ways is actually doing piloting. Very deliberately going to pilot some of the knowledge assets what have been created in the universities, whether it's about research, audiences, algorithms, or you name it. And I guess that's my call both for the two public sector officials is Horizon grants, and most of the R&D grants are currently tailored for creating novel knowledge or novel science. I think we have enough of novel innovations in Europe already. Now we need to scale those innovations, and that really happens through pilots. And I've just recently done a European-funded project where we financed 72 pilots, both with startups from academia and some of the biggest European media corporations, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, VRT, Rularta, Reuters, PBS, and etc. And the hunger to run those pilots where the public money comes in and helps to solve a problem, it's been extraordinary. Plus, we've actually had 3 exits out of there. What I want to say about the really fast university collaboration, I think an extraordinary example is a project called Kreshina. That is a really big consortium out of different universities, Heritiana, INDEC, many of other collaborators are here. And we're basically really trying to solve very fast this sort of data and knowledge analytics problem in the European media industry and publish those findings very fast. And I think we're moving, I think that particular consortium and problem is moving as fast as the problem needs to be solved in the market. So as was said before, once you have the common knowledge and the common interest, which takes time, you can actually move super fast.
So very good note to actually remember is that as this new programming period is under preparation, so maybe more piloting and more applied science should be also covered in this new program period. But I wanted to ask from Heritiana that have you somehow started to do research faster than previously?
That's a very tough question. But I think, there are anyway examples of the different paces. I think now when we've been talking about the media industry, the media sector, we've been talking mainly about startups or small companies. But of course, if you go for bigger, more established companies, yeah, they don't go very quickly. And maybe it's better. I'm not saying it's worse or better. But yeah, or at least not all the departments are moving very quickly. And these are especially the ones when we collaborate with, where I think we can really push them to go a bit faster. Just one field where I think, not me personally, but at least some colleagues, I think we're quite quick in that, is we do quite some user research. And for that, of course, well, I don't know actually. If I don't talk with my colleagues for a year, I have the feeling they've come up with 10 different ways of asking the users questions and getting better to know about really how they experience and the product, the content, and innovation. And of course, this is something that is a mix of the fundamental research. They've been working on it for a lot of years. They've been publishing on it, and also really applied research, where I think, yeah, by doing this, they can really go they can be very quick, and they can help also in the innovation that is just not only something being developed somewhere and tested after 2 years to see if it works. You really take the users from the start of the innovation, in so-called, for example, living labs. You really take them in the beginning of the innovation, and then you can really build something that from the start is going to be, more chances to be successful then.
Alan, the opposite question for you, how to become a little bit slower?
Well, to be honest with you, it was me who was slow when I was working with especially Alex Norda. I mean, it was a question of priority also, because as you were saying, we were putting some things into the market, testing it really quick. We wanted to get some user feedback, and that was the short-term priority of the startup. At the same time, our long-term objective is to release this token and participation economy, but there is regulation that needs to be put into place. And working with Alex, he's a hardworking guy, and he would complete things. And for me, it was like, yeah, okay, that's gonna be published in a year and a half, and I got to deal with right here and right now, and also have to make sure that the financing is in place, blah blah blah. So I think that just goes to show that the priorities of, maybe there's a link here between the research project itself and then putting things into the market. Is the project that we're collaborating on something that's going to happen in 2-3 years and we can determine the pace based on that, or is it we're going to test it out next week and we need to get some feedback? So I think maybe clarifying with each other what the project time frame is and priority frame for both sides could be very helpful.
And also maybe just finding the right topics to collaborate with, that some topics logically takes more time, and this is maybe more convenient and appropriate for cooperation with the universities. But now I actually would like to ask about how to see this cooperation as how to evaluate the cooperation. How could you see what's actually the what demonstrates the success of this cooperation as a whole? What's the ideal picture what this cooperation could be, and how we can say that yes, this is definitely working, this is a very success story, this is something that we try to aim at. Tiit.
Yep. For me, it's quite easy. We always try to have some kind of public sector incentive or middleman to bring these two parties together for an act of cooperation. And if this happens again without us being present for the second time, then it means that both sides have found something in it. And then it starts, naturally to grow. And we have this knowledge transfer offices who try to make it. There are kind of SME voucher schemes, take a voucher, go and try it out. There are other ways of bringing people together. But if it doesn't stick, then it doesn't stick. We have the same, I heard actually French had the same for Horizon Framework Program cooperation. They wanted to know how to assess which French participant is excellent. And we say that very easy. If they win 2 grants, then it means that they're already excellent. One can be random, but 2 already means that there must be something in it that's happening. So I think we can see this cooperation happening more, then I think we are successful. We don't need to develop too much matrices, in my opinion here, because somehow there will be always 2 different sides of the slower side and still the faster side. Although I wanted to comment on that, the public sector is getting faster, and one of the hopes technology which would help us here is the famous artificial intelligence. So we started to specifically look at using artificial intelligence in science. This also needs some kind of framework and guidelines and regulations. But I think Henrik Ronemaa here said in the previous panel that the creation of knowledge is getting very fast and cost to zero. Then this is something which would help also the science to get new knowledge out faster. And I do not have much of the recipe how to get the private sector slower, but I know that if you're asking companies, they definitely say that they are nothing against innovation, but they would love that if innovation would happen a little bit at slower pace, because constantly innovating meaning that you constantly need to put new cost in. And I think there was somebody, the famous venture capitalist Peter Thiel, who has once written a book, One, and an article about it that says competition is for losers. The best state is to be a monopoly, because then there's the biggest profit out of there, right? So the companies would love to have it slow as well, but they are forced into the very, the rapid pace. But one aspect that Alan said, and Sten also said this, I'm worried about this, is that when there comes or become companies too big, then it might happen, or we see it happening, that they are actually starting to take the academia under them. And this is definitely something which which at least from the European Commission side we have been looking at and opening all kind of inquiries towards these companies to see that that definitely goes against the societal value which they could bring.
Katrin, what is the most valued cooperation from your perspective?
Yeah,
have you any metrics?
No, I'm not a believer into metrics. I think it's good to have some KPIs that you could kind of test your ideas against, but you have to kind of concentrate on the actual value that you create, and that very often this value cannot be put into the numbers. And then in that sense, I fully agree with Tiit that I need this continuation in the relationship, and mutual trust is actually the kind of sign of the successful cooperation. So if there will be follow-up projects, then probably something went well, and you want to work with these guys in your coming innovations and in your new projects. But I think it's also, coming back to the Sten's comments on the quality of research, I think also from the academia side, it's very important also to look how this cooperation experience and the knowledge that is gained throughout this process is actually transferred to the teaching activities. Because for the universities, I think this is also a very important part. Where should the academia actually get this insight into the industry, how the models are working, what things are going on? So this is actually the way. How do you actually learn it, and then bring it back, bring it further than into your curriculum? And then if companies say that the curriculum match their needs much better, then it's also a kind of measure of the successful cooperation.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up note for you, that all the university people who are listening to us, that when we have to write these evaluation reports, then we don't have to show the metrics. We have time for a couple of questions. So, from the audience?
I have one, but
Yeah.
I don't know the microphone anymore. I have a question to you, Sten. You said in the very beginning, university and industry collaboration is possible under the right conditions. And then one or two sentences later, you said it happens, but it's not common for the media industry. So my question would be to you is, what are the conditions in the media that wouldn't, like basically that do not support such a collaboration? And then in that context, I'm also super happy that you mentioned our Cassine project, which I would think is a film industry as media, and we are collaborating with industry. But in general speaking, not about this project, but in general speaking, what makes such a collaboration easier in different industries compared to the media?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. But okay, let me just give you a bit of an interpretation, and that's nothing personal, but I think the biggest issue in the media industry is what I would kind of call an ideological bias, and I think the ideological bias, maintaining a kind of an ideological bias purely in an academia is very necessary, because the outcome there is to basically produce excellent science. What I mean is that you always have to, especially in the media industry, you have to consider all kinds of ideologies, influences, subtexts, conditions, criterion, etc. That might impact the media operations, media messaging, and etc. etc. And this is exactly what it's, as an academia, it needs to be all about. But the problem, of course, is that in the industry side, we have to solve, or now I'm taking my kind of industry hat on, we have to kind of solve problems really fast and very pragmatically. And the presumption is like, let's solve the problem and then looks later, right? And there, the vocabulary issue kind of comes really into play. One of the reasons, basically, for example, why I started researching co-productions, for example, years ago, was really the fact that that was a problem on the industry side. Co-production between countries or regions is a very widespread practice, but there was actually no university research, or there was actually very few university research into the matter how those markets operate, what the terminology is, and how can we kind of improve it. The same actually applies for example, the operations of film markets as well. There is a lot of, I would say, ideologically biased research about all kinds of power play and bring Bourdieu into the discussion, etc. But it's not really applicable to the reality of what a major festival organization, etc. Kind of needs. So I guess first of all, I think we all need to talk more. We need to really identify what the problems are really that we both have to join. And I think the opportunity window, because a few days ago, Breton or Comiton basically released the digital market. That who knows, maybe the life for the European media consumers easier, but definitely it's going to be a pretty long draw there, right? So the opportunity, to develop homegrown solutions and really have the European media innovation, or excellence, if you allow me, the momentum really is here. But both sides really need to come out of the comfort zone and kind of get accustomed to the practicalities and the real problems on the site.
So our time is actually running up, and to sum up our interesting discussion, I thought that we should give a recipe. They are just muting me. A recipe in a way that what actually could to foster the collaboration in the future. So I ask each of you 2 components on this good recipe, how you see that is to foster the collaboration in the future. Heritiana, let's start with the 2 main keywords.
2 keywords? No, I would just repeat that each side should really look at how they could collaborate with the others, and that they can really gain from it. If I can just add for the university side, I would really say to my fellow scholars, well, the ones that are here are already convinced, I'm sure, but that it's really beneficial, even for publishing activities and so on, to go and talk and work and collaborate with the industry.
Tiit, your 2 main components.
Yeah, I think first and utmost is that 2 sides should have an opportunity to come together. Are this kind of job, even short-term job offers on both sides? Is it just meeting in the canteen, sharing kind of same place, meeting at the conference? Maybe that's not, it's nice, but my aunt is gynecologist and always said that you can only have a baby if you come together. So from the distance, it doesn't work, no way. And so really coming together, and then the language goes and so on. And the other thing, I think, is curiosity, that you should really show interest in what the others do. Definitely the academia, who has more time, slower, definitely show interest how the industry operates, what is going to happen there, what is changing. But also for industry, you said you graduated 20 years ago, I was even more. And I think that moment we had the best knowledge because we were taught the words. But now over the years we're sort of utilizing that knowledge. We should also try to go back from time to time to see, what is happening in academia, what is the state of art nowadays. And I think Estonia has now a popular thing offering like micro credits or, something credential, yes. So that you can even go for, 6 months and, get and learn something. So lifelong learning. Show up, interest, learn something new. Or like Dagmar was saying, write down a dream and don't block yourself.
Yeah, we had also the commercial moments. Thank you. Katrin, 2 components.
I would just kind of continue with the soft values.
Yeah, you can double. also.
Yeah, definitely. I would actually go for empathy, so that you really accept the differences between these two worlds, and then try to understand what the other side is looking from this, out of this cooperation, and also kind of then bring this common interest and try to find this common space of interest. And I think this is, if you base on your cooperation on a basis of such kind of attitudes, then it is probably successful.
Perfect. Alan?
Celebration. I think, you know, one of the great human components of any collaboration is that there's a outcome, product, or whatever it might be. And I think it's very important that we recognize that, you know, for me, a successful collaboration has to do with the moment where what you worked on actually becomes something tangible. And that is really important for all of us, I think. And I think we need to celebrate those moments when we achieve these things. Shout it out loud, shout it off the roofs. You know? And also, maybe also putting, for me, coming from the Web3 world, you know, it's putting a little pressure, you know, because there's a lot of research being done at universities, there's a lot of private initiatives, private universities, but, you know, it's technology now, which is, what, 14 years old, and the regulation is just not there. And so that, I think, you know, I think both the universities and the private sector would have great benefit, and society in general would have great benefit of speeding up those regulations. So maybe collaborating on a little lobbying might be something to do in the future.
Perfect. And Sten, you have...
Yeah, so my two would be, the number one is shared spaces, physical spaces where the academia and industry can work together, Media City Bergen, MIT Media Lab, Explorer, a couple of examples. And the other point related to that is actively support people who feel themselves comfortably on both sides. We need translators, the people who can jump to academia and vice versa. That's really, really, really important. And I think the second one should be pragmatic and problem solving. That identify the common problems. That's great. One quick thing, micro degrees, totally yes. If we don't support lifelong learning, the AI will take our jobs anyway.
So with these good thoughts, we are going to end our panel. So thank you, truly thank you for this interesting discussion, and hopefully for the audience as well. And we had this networking session, so we can use all these good recipe components to actually elaborate and foster our collaborations. Thank you.